Welcome back to the show where we run you through all the Dolphins news you need to know about. After through the news you need to know about, we run you through the fan Q&A where we answer fans' questions. Not a lot to talk about. It's the dead period. You know, the Super Bowl is coming up. We're almost in the super dead period. So there's not a ton to talk about, but there are a few interesting things that have happened. Shout out to the Bills not making it to the Super Bowl. We talked about Danny Crossman and Wes Welker being fired last week. The Dolphins may lose another coach in the head coaching cycle. I believe the Saints are the only team left that haven't hired a head coach. And obviously Anthony Weaver has taken 2 interviews there. Be weird if they didn't hire Mike McCarthy. But Anthony Weaver is a huge piece to the puzzle when it comes to the Dolphins winning. Obviously, the Dolphins have struggled finding any kind of defensive coordinator consistency. And if they lose Anthony Weaver, that's going to be a devastating blow. I don't think it can be overstated enough. He did bring a physical culture to the defense. It was noticeable in preseason. He did a phenomenal job with a lot of really young players like Chop Robinson and getting the most out of them, picking and choosing when to use them. He adjusted personnel throughout the year. He wasn't stubborn. Tried a bunch of different things. His unit overachieved by a lot. Dealt with a lot of issues in the secondary. A lot of holes there. A lot of injuries, whether Jordan Poyer is playing terrible, Kendall Fuller constantly getting hurt, having to rely on young players like Storm Duck, and still having a very competitive defense. The numbers were really good. Now, granted, when we played really good football teams, some of those issues really reared their head, especially against the Buffalo Bills. But I do think it was a huge step in the right direction. From what Vic Fangio brought, even though he broke the team record in sacks, which is hard, it's crazy to believe, but I do love the direction that he has the defense going in, and he didn't have a full deck of cards, so if they're able to retain him, I'm excited to see what he can do with the defense, and hopefully a lot of those pieces get healthy, especially on the edges. I think should be really exciting. Not only that, but they can add to this Baltimore Ravens scheme, maybe getting a little bit bigger in the middle. I'm excited to see what they do, and I hope they can bring him back. I think that's a very important piece to the offseason, and hopefully they can bring him back, and he'll have even better talent to work with, and I'm excited. Again, his unit overachieved by a lot. He's a great coach. Great interviews. Seems like a good person. And like I said, you could totally see the defense change. So hopefully we can get him to come back. And especially in this murky offseason where we don't know what's going to happen. I mean, who knows? Nothing would surprise me. It does seem like they want to run it back for the most part, but obviously they have to do a lot of stuff to improve the roster. So, I mean, obviously Calais Campbell's up in the air. Teron Armstead is up in the air. Tyreek Hill's up in the air. It doesn't seem like it's as up in the air as it was before, but they have a lot of decisions to make when it comes to the offseason. I just hope that we can retain the defensive line as it is. I think that's the most important part. And obviously, again, Jordan Brooks is another guy. And if they can get Anthony Weaver, a middle linebacker, and another interior defensive lineman, I think this defense could be really, really good. But we'll see. I mean, even Kader Kohou had his best, I would say, overall, 2 months as a starter under Anthony Weaver. Not a whole lot of other news, honestly. Tyreek Hill says a bunch of crazy stuff that doesn't matter. Well, that's kind of normal Tyreek Hill behavior. But I do want to talk about this, which is the most important thing. Obviously, the Dolphins have 10 picks in the draft upcoming. That's coming up. I would say, before we get to talk about the draft, the biggest obstacle in the way of the Dolphins is huge cap numbers on aging players, whether that's Tyreek Hill, Jalen Ramsey, and Teron Armstead. Those are the big three elephants in the room. How they handle this in the offseason is going to be really interesting because that'll directly affect the draft. They clearly want more of an emphasis on the offensive line. I hope that's the case. Mike McDaniel clearly was not happy with it. Very vocal about it. I guess that changed Chris Greer's tune, which is great. I would hope, because clearly it wasn't him. I don't think he's. I don't know. Hopefully, there's some kind of cooperation when it comes to those two. So, but the most important part is if they fix this dang offensive line. Hopefully, they can fix it. Hopefully, that's the goal of the offseason. But that directly, if it's like, what are they going to do with those three players? Is the most important. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. My dog was distracting me. Offensive line is really important. How they're going to do that with regards to free agency or the draft. Teron Armstead is the most important thing because it's like, but they did draft Patrick Paul, which makes things a lot easier. So I don't know. It's going to be really interesting to see how they tackle that situation with the offensive line, and then how do they deal with those three players. And is Tyreek Hill going to be traded? What happens to Jalen Ramsey? And does Teron Armstead either retire or do they move on from him in some way? It's going to be really, really interesting. There's no way Teron comes back. Maybe they do it. I don't know. Like, do they keep him for another year because of the cap? I think the only reason Tyreek Hill isn't traded is because of the dead cap situation. That is the only reason he hasn't been traded. And then obviously they just extended Jalen Ramsey. So I don't know. I would love to know if I gave Mike McDaniel truth serum and was like, how do you really feel about these contracts? I would love to know what he would say. And do you really want Tyreek Hill on the team? I think we can probably have a good guess of what his answer would be. But yeah, that directly affects the draft, especially in the first round. Like, what's the roster going to look like in April? It's going to be really interesting. So this next news story, it's not really a news story, but Daniel Jeremiah, who probably is my favorite mock draft person, he's definitely one of them. I know a lot of people hate Chris. Well, I don't know. I don't really have a favorite mock draft person. I think they all kind of have their problems, but Daniel Jeremiah is probably my favorite. He has the Dolphins picking Kelvin Banks Jr. from Texas, 6'4". I know that Texas had a really good offensive line. I don't know much about Kelvin Banks, but every time I watch Texas, their offensive line did pretty good. I know about him. I know a lot of people like him. I haven't really watched a whole lot of him, but 6'4", can play guard or tackle, which is exactly what the Dolphins need. They need someone in the interior. The most important thing is they need a difference maker and someone who can actually play that position. The funny thing about this whole offensive line issue, they have their two tackles, whether Teron Armstead is on the roster or not. Patrick Paul, I think everybody's pretty comfortable enough for him starting the entire year. And Austin Jackson, I think, has proved himself, especially he's gotten so much better in so many different areas. It's just the guard positions that need to be fixed. So if the Dolphins take a guard, Kelvin Banks, in the first round, I don't think anybody's going to be upset about it. It'll be the hypest guard pick of all time. Just to, finally, we're moving in the direction that we need to be moving in. And I've talked about this many times, but this is supposed to be a run-first team, or a run-first scheme. And it never has been. So it would be nice to Mike McDaniel gets back to his roots and they start building the team around why he was hired in the first place as a run game coordinator, and really utilize the strengths of the scheme the right way. And I think not only that, but protecting Tua is another huge part of that. But I think Tua in that kind of an offense, with the pass game, I think it could be really, really strong. and it's a huge step. And obviously Johnny Smith being here, some of those things, and there's a lot of really good things they could do in the draft. Jason Taylor's son, he comes from I can't remember his name right now. From LSU, that could be a really nice later round pick. There's a lot of things that they could do, and I hope they start molding the team around the run game this offseason. And Kelvin Banks, like I said, I don't know who my favorite lineman is in the draft, but I wouldn't be mad at taking 2 in the round 1 and round 2. I know a lot of people want a quarterback, and as long as they nail those, like if they can nail 2 offensive lineman picks, that would be great. Maybe they get a veteran player at guard, and then they can draft a guard. I would like to draft one, though. I think that would be my preference. But we'll see what they end up doing. They have a lot of decisions to make. They put themselves in this situation, but they need to get better at the offensive line. Like, that is the number one issue, especially competing in the division. Like, anytime we play the Bills, that's a problem. Sustaining any kind of offense against any of the top teams in the AFC has been a problem because we're not balanced, we're one-dimensional, and we have poor protection in those games. Whether it's running the ball or trying to protect Tua in the passing game, just isn't very good. So, hopefully we can start doing that. They're building a roster the right way around the players that we invested in and around the scheme we invested in. It would seem like the smart thing to do, Chris Greer. As for other news, there's really not a whole lot of other news. Well, Chop Robinson was a finalist for Defensive Rookie of the Year. I don't think he's going to win it. It's probably going to Curse from the Rams. Not Javon Curse. Is that his name? It's not Javon Curse. I'm blanking on his name now. Just like actually devastating. Because I really wanted him to win it, and then I was like, oh my god. And then the Curse just had a really good end of the season and in the playoffs, even though it doesn't affect any. I can't. Why am I blanking on his name? So he does probably. I don't know. You guys know what I'm talking about. It doesn't really matter. But it's cool that he was a finalist. Great pick. Didn't think he would be half as good as he is. And ended up turning out really well. And has a bright future. And it makes Bradley Chubb easier to let go, but I hope that they keep him for this season. I think, and if they can keep Weaver, I think those are two really good moves. But, yeah. The draft is going to be really interesting. I think you can throw around some cool theories with, like, if Cam Ward fell, what would the Dolphins do? I think it's a pretty fun scenario. I don't know. I did, for whatever reason, and I know it's not going to happen, but if he somehow got close to them or even fell to them, it would be an interesting discussion in that draft room. I don't know. For whatever reason, I feel that way. But there's some interesting prospects at quarterback. I still think, and I know a lot of people, I think the most interesting prospect and physically gifted is Milroe. That would be an interesting project. And it would be fun to kind of use in the run game, in the red zone. It would give the Dolphins a weapon to use. So that would be a cool pick, I think, in the draft. I know a lot of people don't like him. Jackson Dart has a lot of upside, too. Didn't really perform against good teams, though. Kind of his numbers against good football teams in the SEC are terrible. So there's a lot of issues with a lot of them. Quinn Ewer is not really the prospect that you would want in the modern NFL. He's a very below average athlete. So, you got to take him. I think Milroe would be the most interesting. But yeah, that's it for the news. There's really nothing else to talk about. like I said, we'll see what they do in the offseason. It's gonna be a crazy offseason. I think retaining Weaver was like I said, a huge deal, and continuity and consistency and culture is something the Miami Dolphins haven't had for long periods of time, and hopefully they can start building that now. But and the division just got harder with Vrabel entering it, so the decision making is at an all-time high. So yeah, I'm excited and kind of dreading the offseason at the same time. But yeah, that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed. See you guys in the next one.